Now, those of you who are certain vintage may be surprised to hear that it was 40 years ago this month that the Commodore 64 was launched, part of the personal computer revolution in the early 1980s, along with the ZX Spectrum. It was often one of the first machines people had in their home and would go on to become the best-selling model of all time. Kate Lamble is our science and technology correspondent and is younger than the Commodore 64.
I'm more alive than ever before. What happened to my Commodore 64?
A chunky tan-coloured keyboard, block graphics and a memory roughly the same size as one large email. More than 12 million Commodore 64s were sold in the 1980s, making it the best-selling single computer model of all time.
Commodore 64!
One of the earliest games I played on the Commodore 64.
It still has its fans. Andrew Fisher remembers unwrapping one Christmas.
To have one in the home, to be able to use it when we liked, when we had access to the main TV, was thrilling. Of course, we played a lot of games, but I also learned to program. We used it for other things, including word processing. And there were early forms of what we would now call the web.
What most people who grew up with a Commodore 64 remember most fondly were the games, partly because the system came with one of the first sophisticated sound chips in home computers. The 1980s transformed home computing. If you weren't a Commodore kid, you might have had a ZX Spectrum, which also turns 40 this year, or a BBC Micro, which came out a few months earlier. Smaller and cheaper, these new machines attracted more than just hobbyists. Soon, everyone wanted one.
Homework was never like this. Using your home computer to revise for O-level exams is just one way to make learning easier.
What do you use your computer for?
Mainly games, but I've started writing a few programs myself, little programs and that.
Have you got one?
Nah, hopefully Father Christmas bring one down the chimney this year.
Well, I hope he does.
There are so many computers on the market now that a price war has broken out.
Even those working in the industry were surprised by the transformation.
We just worked extremely hard and had lots of things to do that we thought were exciting. When the BBC Micro came along, Steve and I thought that we'd sell maybe 50,000 of those, and I think we sold 1.25 million. We didn't understand the size of the market and what was happening.
In the last 40 years, this technology has transformed our lives and has itself transformed.
Those computers were sort of the last computers that single people could design and build and understand every part of it. From this point onwards, you started needing computers to design the computer.
There's a new personal computer from Commodore, with a third more built-in memory than the Apple II, at half the cost. The Commodore 64.
Your modern smartphone processes things more than 2,000 times faster than a Commodore 64. But for some, the old charm hasn't gone anywhere.
My original Commodore 64, which is still working, but for a modern solution, we have the Commodore 64 Mini, which actually plugs into a modern HDMI telly. It's not a dead computer by any means. So far this year, there's already been 150 new games released for the Commodore 64. It's been a real joy to see people still loving the machine and still achieving so much more.
Just one glance at a modern game will tell you how far technology has come. But the block graphics of the Commodore 64 and others still inspire millions. Generations of kids racing home from school to experience the same kind of thrill.
More of a Sinclair Spectrum fan myself, but let's take a look at some of the front pages.